Russia's defense ministry has said that its forces have captured the village of Filia in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, even as Kyiv's top commander reported Ukrainian troops recaptured 3 villages in Donetsk, while Lavrov has stated that he has outlined the terms for Ukraine. U.S. National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. will begin carrying M17 pistols or M4 rifles from Sunday night as part of President Donald Trump's crime crackdown, with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorizing the move. President Donald Trump also suggested expanding troop deployments to Democratic-run cities like Chicago and Baltimore. Bangladesh Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus has warned that Dhaka can no longer mobilize additional resources for the 1.3 million Rohingya refugees, urging global powers to deliver a sustainable solution. Nobel laureate Yunus represented 7 action points at a conference marking the 8th anniversary of the Rohingya exodus from Myanmar. Gaza's civil defense has reported 42 people killed in Israeli attacks on Sunday, with more than 1,000 buildings destroyed in Gaza City's Zaytun and Sabra neighborhoods this month. The local agency has warned that ongoing shelling and blocked roads have trapped hundreds under rubble and halting rescue and aid operations. France has summoned U.S. Ambassador Charles Kushner after his Wall Street Journal letter accused Paris of failing to combat anti-Semitism and criticizing France's stance on Israel. However, President Macron has rejected the claims and has boosted security around synagogues and Jewish centers to avoid incidents linked to the Gaza conflict. Iran will hold nuclear talks with Britain, France, Germany, and the European Union in Geneva tomorrow, according to local state media. This will be the second meeting since Iran's 12-day war with Israel in June, when the United States also struck Iran's nuclear facilities. Cambodia's parliament has passed a law allowing the state to revoke citizenship of people convicted of treason, with 120 of 125 lawmakers voting in favor. The move comes amid a wider crackdown on opposition figures, many of whom have been jailed or forced into exile since the ban of Cambodian National Rescue Party. Indonesia and the United States have launched joint military drills with allies from 11 countries today, set to last more than a week, highlighting growing defense cooperation in the region. The exercises aim to strengthen strategic partnerships amid rising geopolitical tensions. Talks between Iran and European powers, Britain, France, and Germany, are set to take place on Tuesday in Geneva, Iranian state media reported. The discussions will focus on Iran's nuclear program and involve deputy foreign ministers from the 3 countries and the European Union. This will be the second round of talks since Iran's 12-day conflict with Israel in mid-June, during which the United States also conducted strikes on Tehran's nuclear sites. The previous meeting occurred on July 25th in Istanbul, with both sides aimed to make progress amid ongoing tensions surrounding the 2015 nuclear deal. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you, Rohan, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, given this backdrop, what strategies do you think European powers will adopt to balance pressure and diplomacy effectively?
Asuma, what's going to happen is that the Europeans will toe the same line as the United States, and they will ensure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. The Americans and the Europeans are working together on this one issue. They do not want Iran to develop a nuclear capability, because then other countries in the Middle East will also develop nuclear capabilities. There's a big conflict between Iran and the Arab states, And the Arab states have always said that if Iran develops a functional nuclear weapon, that they too will develop their nuclear weapon capabilities. So what's going to happen is the Europeans are going to make sure that Iran does not develop functional nuclear weapons. And the Europeans will work very closely with the Americans on this paramount mission to ensure there is no such capabilities developed in the Middle East.
Rohan, as you mentioned that Europe will not change its stance and it will be closer to US's stance. And now we know that just yesterday from the visual that has come in from Iran, Iran also said that we don't align with US's demands and we will not bend to that. Do you think there can be any diplomacy that can effectively take place if both sides are keen on not changing their stance?
There will be no change in the position of the Western powers with regard to Iran's interest to develop nuclear weapons for many reasons. One is the geopolitical reason. Second is, of course, there's a very severe security threat because Iran has sponsored the Lebanese Hezbollah, the Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and also the Ansarullah or the Houthi movement. And Iran is a key sponsor of terrorism. And the Western eyes, the Western governments will ensure that Iran does not move in that direction because that will destabilize not only the Middle East, but also beyond the Middle East. In fact, one Iranian leader recently threatened even the European countries, saying that they are able to fire missiles into Europe. So I personally believe that the time has come where the Western countries and other countries speak with a united voice to ensure that Iran does not develop these special weapons that pose a very severe threat to the stability and security of the world.
Thank you very much, Rohan Gunaratna, for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, before we continue for our discussion, let's cut across to the meeting taking place in Jeddah.
To impose and force the Israeli occupation to release the illegally held tax reviews and the Islamic Arab Ministerial Committee will continue to crystallize and galvanize international support to establish the sovereign Palestinian state on the 1967 borders and support the efforts of Qatar and Egypt to reach a ceasefire in Gaza and provide humanitarian access and humanitarian aid to the Gazans. We also support the measures taken to implement the two-state solution through the coalition toward this end and the high-level international conference co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France. The number of countries intending to recognize the state of Palestine, in addition to the Asian and African countries, in addition to European countries and South America. This asserts that the violations undertaken by Israel are rejected by the majority of the international community, and those who are still hesitant to put an end to this impunity should take another course. And the continuation of this impunity will undermine international system and the rules of international law and undermine the multilateral opportunities for cooperation and international legitimacy and would expand the cycle of violence and undermine the peace and security not only in this region but the entire world. In conclusion, we hope that our meeting today will reach a tangible conclusion that would support peace and security and stability in the region and put an end to the cycle of violence and diffuse all the efforts on this opposite in order to have prosperity for all our people. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for holding this extraordinary meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the OIC upon our request and other member states regarding the unprecedented grave developments related to Gaza and the decision of the Israeli occupation authorities to storm it and impose their control on its entirety. At the outset, I would like to convey to you the thanks of the Palestinian people and its leadership and President Mahmoud Abbas, to the custodian of the two holy mosques, and to his royal crown prince for their unprecedented support for the Palestinian issue and the inalienable rights of our people to self-determination and the sovereignty of the state of Palestine on the borders of the 4th of June 1967 with Al-Quds Sharif at its capital and the return of the refugees. Mr. Chair, we would like also to express our heartfelt thanks for your presence today and for your support and for the General Secretariat of the OIC and its Secretary General for their commendable efforts. Mr. Chair, Israel seeks to impose its full military sovereignty on the Gaza Strip and extend the...
Now for this discussion, we go to Rohan Gunaratna. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you, Rohan, for staying with us. Now, looking at these talks, considering the involvement of deputy foreign ministers rather than top-level officials above them, so what do you think, what does this signal about the seriousness or expectations for these negotiations?
What is important is that the negotiations take place, because whether they are ministers or deputy ministers, what is important is the position of every country to be known to another, so that there will be a concerted movement towards restoration of peace. There are two matters that needs to be resolved. One is that Israel is now planning the conquest of Gaza. In fact, Israeli minister has said that they will demolish Gaza if the hostages are not released. So what is paramount is to put maximum pressure on Hamas to ensure the release of the remaining hostages, not only the living hostages, but the fallen hostages. Their remains to be repatriated to Israel. If that does not happen, the Israeli troops will conquer Gaza and also will demolish the Gaza city. This threat has to be taken very seriously, because Israel will not tolerate any of its nationals and foreign nationals who are taken by Hamas and other terrorist groups to be continuously held in Gaza. So this consideration is essential. One is the release of the hostages. Number two is the disarmament of Hamas. And third is that either Hamas leave Gaza or they surrender.
Yes, thank you very much, Rohan Gunaratna, for joining us and sharing that insight from Singapore. Thank you. Now we move on. A footage from Gaza's Nasser hospital shows a second Israeli strike hitting rescue workers after an initial attack, leaving at least 15 people dead, including 4 journalists. The IDF has yet to comment on this incident. Meanwhile, an Al Jazeera cameraman was also killed in Gaza, according to a spokesperson. As tensions rise, the former Dutch Foreign Minister Caspar Veldkamp has spoken out against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's policies, warning that they are jeopardizing Israel's security and identity. Veldkamp expressed concerns over Israel's military operations in Gaza, particularly the ongoing offensive in Gaza City. He emphasized that the war, initially seen as a defensive response to the October 7th Hamas attacks, has now lost its justification and must come to an end. Veldkamp also criticized Netanyahu's government for losing legitimacy in the eyes of the world, despite his long-standing support for Israel's security. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Alia Muhammad Abushbak. He's an independent Palestinian researcher, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you, Ali, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, can you tell us more about the situation with Veldkamp criticizing Netanyahu's government and what's happening now?
Thank you, Suma, for having me. In fact, it's a grave day for the Palestinian while Israel assassinated and targeting a civil defense and a journalist on live stream. Around 4 journalists have been killed on the screen while the international community and all the world watching them. They are targeting deliberately by the Israelis' suicide drone. Yesterday night, it was one of the intense nights for the Palestinian while Israel bombardment the whole area from northern part of Gaza in Jabalia and Nazla neighborhood and Jabalia campus neighborhood. 4 more there. Also in Khan Yunis, Mawasi Khan Yunis. That was one of the intense night for the Palestinian while the children feared of the continuous bombardment. Usually Palestinians used to refer to such kind of Israeli bombardment like a fire builds. This is the term used by Palestinians to describe the heavy and intense bombardment simultaneously while the Israelis airstrike drop a mass of missiles in one area that's lifted as a rubble and destroy the residential unit, the whole residential unit. Israel used a suicide report as well as in this area that's lifted as several of casualties from the civilians and also the defense, the civil defense from Gaza. In fact, the situation is more incredible and it's difficult. Today, Francisca Albanese condemned the Israelis' behavior by killing the journalist on the live stream. Also, today there is a mass of a protest in Australia, Sydney, and several of city in Australia condemning Israel's behavior and also condemning assassinating of the journalist like last 2 weeks when they killing the Al Jazeera correspondent Anas Sharif and his team. Today also Israel committed the same crime against several of social media activists and the journalists on the ground without any care about the international community and without care about or consideration about international law, and that's protected the civilians and protected the journalists on the ground. Among of this atmosphere, I guess there is no hope for a negotiation and there is no hope for a ceasefire between Palestinian and Israel, especially in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu, he faced several of lambast from the Israelis community and Israelis media about delaying to reach to deal with Hamas and releasing the whole captive or releasing as a part of the captive from Gaza. That's ensured that how much the Israelis IDF is brutal, despite also there is a disagreement between the Israeli militant and the politician. There is a several of a disagreement about the second phase of the Ghazian's chariot operation in Gaza. They consider it is meaningless and it's not giving any, it's not achieving to any aims except to make their army more tired and also fail as several of Israelis IDF soldiers as casualties in this kind of war. Because of there is an action, there is a response. Definitely, Palestinian resistance. They will confronted with the Israelis troops that invaded Gaza. So that's it. Israel maybe used the suicide report to destroy the area and destroy the residential unit in north part of Gaza as well as in south part of Gaza. 90% of Gaza City and Gaza Strip
Yes.
Gaza Strip is completely destroyed and it's a rubble.
Yes.
So that's it. Also, UNESCO yesterday releasing a statement about more than 29 children being killed daily in Gaza. That exacerbated the situation and make the humanitarian situation in Gaza more incredible.
Yes.
And
Thank
behind the
you.
imagination of Soma. So
Yes.
among of these atmosphere, I guess Palestinian today so pessimistic and also.
Thank you, Ali. Sorry, we are running out for time on this discussion, but thank you very much, Ali. I'm Bushbug for joining us and sharing your insight from Cairo. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. Cambodia has passed a controversial new law allowing the state to revoke the citizenship of people convicted of treason. The legislation was approved on Monday by 120 of 125 members in the ruling Cambodian People's Party, which is dominating the parliament now. Under the measure, anyone found guilty of conspiring with foreign powers or plotting against Cambodian interests can now be stripped of their nationality. The move comes amid the years-long crackdown on opposition voices since the Supreme Court dissolved the main opposition party in 2017. Hundreds of activists and politicians have faced mass trials, many jailed in absentia on treason and incitement charges. Prominent dissidents like exiled CNRP co-founders Sam Rainsy and Mu Sochua remain abroad, continuing to challenge Hun Sen's powerful ruling party. The new law deepens concerns among Western governments and rights groups that Cambodia's political space is shrinking further, ensuring little room for dissent. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Thomas Porteous. He's an anchor and correspondent at NewsX World. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us. What more can you tell us about this situation coming in from Cambodia?
Yes, of course, Asuma. A very controversial law brought in by the Cambodian government led by Hun Sen. Obviously, Cambodia is just reeling from a recent conflict with neighboring Thailand. However, this law was brought in and put forward before that, and it is the Cambodian's government way of tackling with the opposition in the country. There has been a rise in concerns from opposition, threatening opposition towards the Hun Sen government, which the leader is keen to crack down on. There was an overwhelming majority when voting for this law in the Cambodian parliament. 120 out of 125 members of parliament voted in favour of it back in July. Now the implementation has just come in today, and as you said, it covers all citizens, whether that's naturalised, lifelong or dual. If you commit treason against the Cambodian government, you are no longer a citizen and you will have your passport stripped from you. There are obviously concerns about this, mainly over the fact that is it that Cambodia is using this to silence opposition, to weaken democracy in the South Asian country. Cambodia's main opposition was dissolved in 2017, and many opponents of the Hun Sen government do remain in exile. And so there is obviously critical voices sounding alarms around this now implemented law. But of course, the future seems to be known whether this law will be implemented. But of course, here on NewsX, well, we will keep you covered in everything coming out of that Southeast Asian nation.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for sharing that insight. Now we stay in Asia. Vietnam is bracing for the impact of Typhoon Kajiki, which is expected to make landfall today afternoon. With gusts of up to 166 kilometers per hour, the storm has already forced mass evacuations, the closure of airports, and the suspension of flights. Over 500,000 people are being evacuated, with thousands of soldiers and paramilitary personnel mobilized for search and rescue operations. Authorities are warning of heavy rain, flooding, and landslides, particularly in less industrialized areas, which could see significant damage. Kajiki is forecast to continue moving inland towards Laos and northern Thailand. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Ajit Kumar. He's a managing director at Kushigram Foundation, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Ajit, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, how do you think, how prepared is Vietnam's infrastructure and emergency response to handle this impact by Typhoon Kajiki?
See, Vietnam has made decent development in last few decades and few years. They are, but the kind of disaster that the country is facing is really enormous. So the kind of infrastructure that is required for disasters like this is not very efficient in most of the countries, you can say. Even US faced a lot of challenges during the fires and cyclones and all. So actually we are not yet prepared for these kind of disasters. And on the other side, we are trying to move towards the disasters. This is very paradoxical, but it's a fact. So Vietnam needs help from other countries also, and I think some countries have come forward for that, for supporting them. But the kind of the high speed of the winds up to say 165, 66 kilometers per hour, that is huge. And the kind of storm and the cyclone, and the coastal areas, the farmers, and like everybody is at risk nearby. I think more than 6 lakh plus people have been asked to have to be evacuated, and the numbers will definitely increase, not decrease. So that big challenge is there. So for these kind of disasters, there should be an international forum, a group on disaster, which should train paramilitary and military and other forces and disaster response forces of all the countries. That has to be a global action taken in the